a hard rock and power trio that didn't want to put bumpers on Buicks. Today, on Under the Classic Rock, the trials and tribulations of the arena rock of Grand Funk Railroad.
Are you ready? You can trust me all the way.
They were definitely a pure American band from the Rust Belt, Flint, Michigan. Drummer Don Brewer, bassist Mel Shocker, and guitarist Mark Farner were a garage band that turned into one of the largest arena rock bands of the 70s. The trio of guys did not want to repeat the past of many generations of Flinters, graduating high school and then assembling Buicks for the rest of their lives. The band sprang up in 1966 from Don Brewer's band, the Jazz Masters. A former disc jockey who wanted to be a singer in a rock and roll band approached Don one night after a gig and not only talked his way into the band, but also got them to rename the band to Terry Knight and the Pack. He got his way because he could get gigs. Soon, Mark Farner joined as a bass player. They had a successful single.
I do have nothing.
The record scored on local charts, got played on Flint and Detroit radio stations, and eventually got onto the national Billboard charts that got them a shot at a national TV show called Where the Action Is.
So need to meet your baby where the action is.
After the national exposure, lead singer Terry Knight left to go solo. The Pack pushed Mark Farner to the front for vocals. The band then hooked up with management that got them booked into clubs in Cape Cod, Massachusetts, of all places. And then the management stranded the Pack with no money, no nothing, on the Cape in a blizzard. When they finally got back to Flint, the married guys in the Pack were threatened with divorce and left the band. The Void left the band with a lineup that would become a worldwide sensation.
Is it the winter to which I am due?
They rehearsed the trio and hooked up once again with Terry Knight because he was now working for Capitol Records. Mark Farner did not like the idea. He thought that Knight was nothing more than a con man. But Terry Knight came on again just as a manager and turned them into a power trio. Knight saw in 1967 Cream, Jimi Hendrix's Experience, Blue Cheer, all successful power rock trios. The new setup worked. The name was changed to Grand Funk Railroad. They perfected the trio so well that they got accepted onto the prestigious marquee of bands at the Atlanta Pop Festival in 1969.
Got this thing on the move. It's digging in.
The Atlanta Pop Festival was the springboard for the band. Capitol wanted to sign the band, but because of their management contract with Terry Knight, the label had to sign with him, not the band. Knight had complete control. But Grand Funk was starting to feel success, and all they wanted to do was play and make records, which they did. From 1969 to 1983, the first 11 albums went platinum. More records sold than any other American band at the time. First into the record stores in 1969 was On Time.
You won't find me knocking at your door. I'm gone forever. You don't love me no more.
In 1970, I'm Your Captain started getting lots of airplay on progressive radio, and even more fans got on the Grand Funk train.
I'm your captain, yeah, 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 yeah.
Other huge sellers came with Survival, E Pluribus Funk, and Phoenix. Then in 1972, the wheels started to come off the train. Don, Mel, and Mark knew the band was raking in the cash, selling out arenas, millions in record sales, but each were only making about $350 a week. Something was not right. Manager Terry Knight was fired. Knight sued. The band lost all their equipment. Investments didn't pan out. Knight stated in a VH1 documentary that if the band had just waited 3 months before firing him when his contract was up, they would not have incurred any of the hardships with Knight. So in late 1972, the band regrouped with less cash, new producers, and additional players. They brought in a friend from Flint, Michigan, keyboard player Craig Frost. In 1973, they realized they needed a hit to keep the cash rolling in and keep the record company happy. They brought on Todd Rundgren to produce, and it was that collaboration that resulted in the best-selling Grand Funk albums. 1970s, the fun was going out of playing. The band started putting out less than stellar material. They were just getting burned out. They put out Born to Die in 1976, thinking it would be their last album. It had pictures of the band in coffins. Then Frank Zappa talked them back into the studio, and they released Good Singin', Good Playing. It did not result in much sales. But the bullet that finally killed Grand Funk was disco. They refused to play it or produce any disco, so they finally called it quits in 1976.
You can tell by the way I use my walk, I'm a woman's man, no time to talk.
That's it, I'm out of here.
There were reunions in 1981 and 1996, and currently Grand Funk does do sporadic gigs, but mostly without Mark Farner. Some true and false before we pull the wheels off this train. True, the Grand Funk name was a play on words coming from the prominent train line going through Flint, Michigan, the Grand Trunk Western Railroad. And Terry Knight was their first manager's real name. False. His real name was Richard Terrence Knapp. Thanks for listening and downloading Under the Classic Rock. I do appreciate it. I'm Bill Hemberger. You can help support the show and keeping it rocking by going to undertheclassicrock.com and finding something you like. Talk to you next time on Under the Classic Rock.